We've got Karen Bass with us today, representative from Los Angeles. She's California 37, which most people wouldn't have any idea where that is, but it's just south of UCLA's campus in Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, all the way down to Ingleside, over sort of to downtown LA, over to Santa Monica. She is in her 5th term as a congresswoman. She grew up in LA, in the Venice, Fairfax area. She attended some university that's in Southern California, not the public one. You've probably heard of it before, but she went to USC, and she ended up actually being an instructor there for a number of years too. She started as a community organizer, and she worked in, with some of Los Angeles's most needy people, poor folks, people who had drug issues, and she organized, and it was the work through that organization, her community organizer, that led her to represent the area in the California Assembly, where she was elected speaker, the first African-American woman to ever be a speaker in any state in the United States. And then she was elected to Congress. And as I was just telling her, we really appreciate her being here. And she's been outstanding to interns. I've had interns who have told me that after they posed with their congressperson at the end of the term, one student specifically told me that he heard a congresswoman saying, she didn't think she could hear him, "Oh, I thought that guy was the male guy." She had no idea who the guy even was. Representative Bass has been completely different. She has pulled students into her office the first couple of days of their internship. She's asked them about their interests. She has had them included in meetings. I am sorry you guys are all remote right now, so you don't get to see that in action. But when you come to Washington, I'll extend an invitation on her behalf right now. Come by and say hello to Representative Bass. I've got lots of questions. I hope you guys have lots of questions. So I'm going to ask about 10 minutes worth of questions, and you guys, if you have a question, type it into the chat or just put your name in chat, and either way we will unmic you and you can go in and ask her yourself. If for any reason you don't want to ask it yourself, if you want to just type in the question, we'll read it anonymously, but rather you said it yourself. So let me start with Representative Bass. You have gotten a lot of attention in the last 2 months. And I mean, including front page profiles in the New York Times. And now I see speculation about cabinet posts you might occupy. And this is because Joe Biden considered you as a possible running mate. Can you walk us through that a little bit? What was that like? Was that good for you? Was it bad for you? What was it like talking to the vice president, perhaps the next president?
Well, I will tell you that the most important thing to know is that it was a tremendous honor. It really was a tremendous honor and just overwhelming. It was an incredible journey. It was definitely a good. You understand when you go through a process of that, which is a vetting process, and that vetting process looks to see who you are. And I will tell you that it was very in-depth. I mean, you saw the press coverage, but I also through a team of people from the campaign that know the vice president very well, that asked me all sorts of questions about my life. So it was a trip down memory lane, and caused me to remember so many of my experiences as a young person, and also to help them to understand who I am now. And so the quickest way that I told them to understand who I am now is look at all of the protesting that took place after George Floyd. Look at the protesting that took place after a number of the shootings, the Parkland shooting, for example, and the activists that are working on climate change. That's who I was as a youngster. And as a teenager, made a commitment at a young age to fight for social and economic justice. And so they took me through that journey, and that was a very great experience. And I look forward to see what comes next. I love where I am now, but if there's opportunities to serve on another level, I'm certainly examining that as well.
So, and this is, I'm asking you to open it up in ways that obviously you don't need to, there are millions of Americans, probably more men than women, who every day think, you know what, I might be president of the United States someday. including half of your colleagues and everyone in the Senate. Okay, I mean, you have reached incredible political achievements, but at least in my political orbit, no one's talked about Karen Bass might be the president of the United States. And I don't know whether that ever entered your mind, but for a brief period, there's a real chance that you would be named as a running mate and could end up as president of the United States. I'm wondering if you can describe what that thought process was like for yourself.
Well, it still feels surreal. Even you recounting it now feels surreal, because you are absolutely right. I've never aspired to run for president, and I never aspired to be picked as a vice presidential candidate as well. And so I didn't live my life that way. And, and it's kind of tough, because if you live your life always thinking about what you're going to do next, then it really colors what you're doing now. And I've just always tried to do a good job at whatever it is I am doing now. And what I have found over my life's journey is that when you work really hard at what you're doing today, opportunities open up. And that's certainly what happened to me. I was willing to serve at no matter what, at whatever level, because I think that our country is at such a dire crossroads. And what has happened to us over the last 3.5 years really is frightening. And who would have known that we would have lost 200,000 Americans in a matter of months with a leader who doesn't seem to be that concerned about it? And so all of that pushed me to a point where I don't care what you ask me to do at this point in time, I'm willing to step up, because I do believe that that's how dire the situation is. But I did not set out to be an elected official, and I did not set out to be a vice presidential candidate, but was extremely honored to have been included. And it was an incredible group of women. And I think that the vice president made the right decision. I think Kamala Harris is a great running mate, and she's going to be a great VP, and it's going to be so exciting in January to see the two of them sworn in and to see history made.
You have no doubt that that's going to happen?
Well, I absolutely have doubt, and I have doubt because I'm worried about cheating. If it wasn't for cheating, I frankly would have no doubt, because I think the public sentiment is clear. But this is an example, two extreme examples of where we are as a nation is what is happening with our democracy right now in terms of the election, and how many lives were lost unnecessarily. And so, I work in foreign policy, and I go to many African countries, and I'm preaching democracy and telling them about the right to vote and freedom of speech and all of that. But we can't say that right now because of the way we are behaving. And what was discovered in California just 2 days ago, fake voting boxes, so people can turn in ballots, and those ballots could potentially be thrown away. It just seems like it's an endless number of gimmicks. And the idea that the administration would intervene with the post office, these are things that we would have never, ever imagined. So we're in trouble right now.
Do you hear that I want to ask you a few policy questions. Do you hear that in Africa? Do people actually, do people understand that things are different in the United States right now with regards to fair and open elections?
I will tell you that one thing, and this is true about the world knows so much more about us than we know about the world. They know exactly what is going on here. And I have had to, on behalf of the American people, apologize. You remember a couple of years ago when he referred to the entire African continent as S-hole countries? Well, what you might not know is that the African Union, which is 55 countries, all of their ambassadors are in Washington, D.C. They have an office and they meet as a group. And I asked to go speak and address the body of ambassadors after the president made that comment. And I apologized on behalf of the American people and assured them that we were going through a crisis in our country, but that viewpoint did not represent the American people.
So, you are, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't mess it up. You are the chair of the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations.
Yes.
But what you said is, I think true to anybody who's been around the world, that Americans know nothing about other countries, or little. Right. And although our students are an exception, they often don't care about other countries.
Right.
I'm wondering how you get Americans to care about a continent like Africa.
Well, one thing is, and this is a little ironic, but it's educating Americans about the Africans that live right here. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of Africans that live here. I also always explain to people how big Africa is. I mean, it's 55 countries. You can take the continental United States and fit it on the continent of Africa three times. 1 billion people. And that the majority of the countries are peaceful countries. The only countries you hear about are the countries that are in conflict. And so that begins to open people up. But it is so important for us to understand how we're connected to the world. And if this pandemic doesn't do it, I'm not sure. I mean, this is a worldwide problem. And it shows how close we are as a planet, that a disease could spread so rapidly that would impact the entire planet. And it is amazing to sit back and think about we're all going through this, no matter where we are in the world.
So AIDS was something that at first really hit places like California, New York, and was worse in the United States. But then you got a better handle on it, and it ended up being just devastating for the African continent, where it still is a devastating problem. Is this possible with COVID-19 as well, that this is going to end up festering there because of the poor conditions? Or, I mean, are they on top of it?
Well, you know, it's a wonderful question. And as of right now, the African continent as a whole is doing very well in terms of COVID, with two exceptions, and that is South Africa and Egypt. They are experiencing a large death rate and infection rate, but nothing like it is here. It is far worse here than it is in South Africa and Egypt. And there have been very few deaths around the African continent. And people believe there's a couple of things going on. Number one, the Africans are acutely aware of the impact of a pandemic. And so they shut down immediately. And they also stopped all air travel. And so you can't go to Americans, by the way, there's a lot of the world that we can't go to now. They don't want us because they know we have mishandled this. Now, nothing like that has ever happened before. But it is about our leadership, because we had a pandemic, it could have been a pandemic under Obama, and that was Ebola. And it never became a pandemic. Why? Because he mobilized the entire world and they stopped it. It didn't even spread in Africa. It stayed in 3 countries in Africa. So with proper leadership, I'm sure we would have lost a lot of people, but there's no way we would have lost 200,000 people.
So you were, your predecessor, one of your predecessors is California Speaker, was Willie Brown, who says that he always thought that the best job in the world and being a mayor was a stupid idiot's job, until he became mayor of San Francisco, and then he realized the most important job in the world. I'm wondering what your perspective, having been there and now here, and I guess if you could think of it this way, what our students are not in Washington because of the pandemic. What is it that most Californians don't understand about Washington?
Well, I think that average Californians don't have any idea what happens in Congress. And I know this, and it doesn't matter how educated or affluent you are, because my district, as you described, covers very affluent areas on the west side. And every time I have a town hall meeting, and I miss town hall meetings. I mean, now we do them like this, but I certainly miss the in-person meetings. But I always have to spend a certain amount of time explaining that I'm not in city council, and that I can't help today with your traffic or your trash or different issues like that. So the basics of how DC works. And then also the other thing that we don't understand as Californians is the political diversity of the country. I mean, they call us the left coast for a reason, because our politics here are way far more liberal than they are in the rest of the country. And I find that a lot of Californians are pretty shocked by that. Now, we certainly have conservative parts of our state as well, but in general, our state is very, very liberal.
a couple more questions, and then please, other students, I'm going to have you jump in. So be prepared with questions because I'll keep going otherwise. So the Supreme Court yesterday said that the census could stop counting for now, and there's going to be an undercount. But even perhaps more significant than that is the Trump administration said they're not going to count undocumented immigrants. And for a place like your district, and what it means is California may actually lose a congressional seat for the first time in history. Explain what that means to your district, and why aren't more people running around outraged by this?
Well, first of all, I think the average person doesn't quite understand the impact of the census. And the census determines our representation and our resources for the next 10 years. I don't know that there has ever been as sinister of a plot to intentionally undermine the count as there has been with this administration. And then the frightening thing is the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court has had so many decisions that go absolutely against our democracy. So for example, they ruled that in Texas, it was okay to have one place where you could turn in ballots. Now, if you can imagine in the city of Los Angeles, 4 million people, if there was only one location to turn in ballots. Well, there's several counties in Texas that have over 1 million people. One county has 4 million people with one place to turn in a ballot. That then forces people to vote in person and put their health in jeopardy. So the Supreme Court, and the president views the Supreme Court as his personal court. And so the fact that they ruled on the census, and both of these court decisions were overturning lower court decisions that had ruled in a more democratic fashion. So in terms of undocumented in the census, now the courts ruled against the president from having the citizenship question on the census form. But the president has decided that he's just not going to turn in the information. And so I don't really know how that's going to turn out, but it is a dire situation, and I'm not sure it's one that we can impact. So we had a call, I was on a call just an hour ago, where we're going to talk to our lawyers and find out if the election turns out right. And from my perspective, that means we not only win the White House, but we win the Senate. If there is some legislative fix that we could do, frankly, I think we need to redo the entire census, but we'll see what happens.
All right, so I'm calling for questions, and so far I don't think any have emerged, but you're gonna have to listen to me ask questions if you don't jump in with your own. So jump in with your own, folks. Could you describe most of our students are seniors in college, and they're looking for internships, and they're all public service oriented, or they wouldn't be doing a program like this. But explain, you said you had no dream that you'd even be in politics.
Right.
Like, what did you want to do, and how did you end up taking such a path?
Sure, and it was definitely an evolution and a journey. But I set out as a teenager, as I mentioned, growing up as a child, watching the civil rights movement, and as a teenager when the anti-war movement was there and the Black Power movement, all of those movements were occurring, the independence movements around the world. I made a commitment at a very young age that I wanted to spend my life fighting for social and economic justice. Now, when I was growing up, I did not have the opportunities that your students have today. So it also didn't occur to me that anybody would pay me to do that. and so I needed a job. And so my other love was in healthcare and medicine. And so I went to nursing school. I went back to school again and became a physician assistant. I was teaching, as you described, at that other university, which I represent. But I was politically active after work in the community. I worked on a variety of issues. I worked on police abuse. I worked on solidarity movements, against apartheid, to free Nelson Mandela. And then when the crack cocaine crisis hit, I walked away from the faculty at the medical school. I was teaching at USC. And I started my own organization, which exists today, called Community Coalition. It's in South Central Los Angeles. And we knew in 1990 that we were going to have mass incarceration. We could see it happening because we saw the laws changing. And I believe deeply that the crack cocaine and the gang crisis was a health, a social, and an economic crisis that we were criminalizing. And so we started an organization to try to shift that agenda. And I just have to say, I am so happy today, even though it took a long time, but some of the ballot initiatives that we're going to vote on, like Proposition 15 around corporate taxes, property taxes, Proposition 16 around affirmative action, those were activities that we were involved in when we took away affirmative action. We had a big campaign to fight against that proposition. We fought against the proposition that essentially kept property taxes low for homeowners, for commercial real estate, but not individual homeowners. There were propositions like 3 strikes, all of those things that we fought against. The social justice movement has matured to the point where we now know how to do propositions ourselves, and we know how to raise the money ourselves and create the organizations to win. So today, for all of the students that are listening, it took a long time, but when you're thinking about how to contribute, there are a variety of nonprofit social justice organizations that you can work at. You can work on staff. You don't have to live a double life like I did for years. You can actually get paid to do what I was doing for free. And so I did that for 14 years, working at Community Coalition and building the organization. And then it became time because of term limits. A number of people turned to me and said, "You've been in the community a long time. Why don't you run for state office?" And it was actually the Congresswoman who was in office at the time, Congresswoman Diane Watson, who suggested that I run because all of the Black women had termed out in Sacramento and there were no African American women. And I realized that I could go in office and work on the same issues that I was working on in the community. So that's why I ran. And my first campaign was wonderful because I had been working in the community for years. So I didn't have to work and talk about what I was going to do. I could work and talk about what I had already done. So for people that are interested in running for office, the first thing I always say to them is why? Why do you want to be there? Because you have to go into office with a specific agenda, because if you don't, you will get swept up in the whirlwind, and believe me, it'll be difficult to accomplish things if you're not very clear on why you're there to begin with.
And I think I failed to mention at the top that you're chair of the Congressional Black Caucus now. As you got into politics, I mean, for a lot of people, being a woman and being African American makes it extraordinarily difficult to break into that world. I'm wondering if you've seen an evolution there, how much of a barrier that still is.
Well, I think that this is a great opening right now, because I don't believe that I mean, it's always challenging, but I will tell you, and I do still chair the Black Caucus. As a matter of fact, that was the call I was referring to. My Zoom call before this was a meeting of the Congressional Black Caucus. Well, we have 5 members of our caucus who are elected to Congress who don't represent Black people. So the Black population in their districts is from 1% to 5%. So I think that the barriers are crumbling. There are still challenges, but I don't think the challenges are severe as they were before. And I think that we are seeing African Americans get elected, not just to Congress, but to all kinds of offices from diverse districts. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if there's one member of the Congressional Black Caucus who has a district that's like 80 or 90% Black. All of our districts are diverse. I mean, look at my district. You know my district. There's no way my district is majority Black.
Right. And Barbara Lee's perhaps even less, if I'm familiar with that district.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And again, and anybody who's on the call, if you want to just go ahead and ask question. I don't see any questions here, so I'm going to keep talking, but just.
Oh, I actually do.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
I'm going to go ahead and bring Matthew in. Hello, Congresswoman.
Yep, we can hear you, Matthew.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So if Donald Trump loses the election in November but refuses to concede, how do you feel the Democratic Party should respond?
Well, first of all, he can refuse to concede all he wants. At the end of the day, his term expires. What I imagine will happen will be, one, he will lose, and I am really holding out that he will lose on November 3rd. The way things are going now, I don't think that it's going to be all that controversial, but I have to say we can't let our guard down for 1 second. We cannot take it for granted. So we have to make sure that we can do everything we can with everybody we know to make sure that they know how to vote. But basically, our country is not going to have a military coup, and that would be the only way he could stay in office. I will tell you that after he loses, those 2 months that he will remain in office are going to be pretty scary for all of us, because I'm not sure what havoc he's going to wreak. But I don't believe that people are going to continue to follow him, those people that are there. And my bet is that the minute he's off the scene, watch how quickly people flee, and watch how they change what they've done over the last 3 years. Watch them all abandon him. I don't think that they will hang by him at all. But we do not, I mean, the way things happen in our country, he will probably say, we have to wait till we count all the votes or something like that. But I think that you will watch his support fall. But I will tell you that I'm actually worried about all of those militia groups, all of the white supremacist groups that he has essentially given license to. I worry about their reactions. And I think that there might be some isolated incidences of problems. I'm more worried about them than I am about him.
Okay, can we go to Olivia?
Yes. I found a few locations for Olivia.
There she is.
All right. Hi, everyone. Firstly, thank you, Representative Bass, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come talk to us and share a little bit about your political journey. My question is about how President Trump has gone back and forth whether he will proceed with stimulus bill discussions before the election. How will this affect election outcomes and, of course, the livelihoods of Americans across the country who've been waiting for months to see another bill come their way?
And I'm so sorry, because that is what I'm concerned about in terms of how it is affecting people today. One of the things that happens in Washington, I was so sure, we usually wait until the last minute, right when the car is getting ready to go over the cliff, and that's usually when we make a decision, when we are pressed to the last second. Well, that was the end of July. And I thought for sure it would be at the last minute, but we would at least extend unemployment. We would at least extend the supplement, and also the support around rent. And so I feel very bad that we've not been able to do that. Truthfully, it is all about the White House, because at this point in time, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, doesn't really play that role. He acts more like a staff person to the White House. And so the negotiations are between Speaker Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin on behalf of the White House. And he just keeps going back and forth. So I am very worried that we won't come up with a deal. But, I've seen it happen where I say that, and 24 hours later, I get an email telling me to go to DC because we're getting ready to have a vote. So I hope that we will do something before then. There is no reason for the suffering that is going on now. And what the president says is that he doesn't really want to do a deal because the only states that are being hurt are states run by Democrats, which is not true. The thing that I can't understand, though, is in the red states. I don't understand how those senators get away with it because they represent people, as well who are hurting and dying.
Would you support, I'm just following up on that. I know that the president has said, and I think most Republicans say that they're fine with the $1,200 check as a stimulus. And Democrats are fine with that, although Democrats have many other things they want. What prevents Democrats from saying, fine, let's at least agree on that. We'll pass a very tiny bill that only does that one thing, but at least everyone can agree on that. I mean,
so what the speaker is worried about is that if we do that, because I will tell you, the main thing that the Republicans want is not that. They're not going to pass a bill just for that. The main thing they want is liability protection for employers, which means that employers can force you to come to work or fire you. Or if you have a job where you catch COVID, you can't sue them. They want that. And they want retroactive tax breaks for corporations. That's what they want. And she's worried that if we pass a bill that has the $1,200 payment and the other things I just mentioned, that they won't do anything else. And so, for example, in California, we need state money because of all of our wildfires. We need local money and state money to pay teachers and hospitals and nurses and doctors. And so she's very afraid that if we go for a bill that only has 3 or 4 things in it, that they won't do anything until after the next president is sworn in.
Okay. We've got a couple of anonymous questions, which I'm going to just sort of summarize and put into one. They have to do with internships, which is important, obviously, to our students. You said that you bring interns in to talk with them. What's your philosophy about doing that? How do you find time to do that? And is there anything in your mind that sets interns apart? But I imagine we're talking about good interns versus less good interns.
Well, first of all, when I said that I made a commitment as a very young person to devote my life to fight for social and economic justice, I understand, and I think we all understand after going through the last 3 years, that even when you win things, you can't assume that they will be won forever, like the Voting Rights Act, like civil rights protections, like environmental protections. And so the struggle for social and economic justice goes on forever. And so I am extremely committed now, as I'm significantly older, to the next generation and for the next generation to be prepared. So I view it as one of my primary responsibilities is to pass the baton on. And so when you come in an intern, my agenda for you is I want you to have a life-changing experience that then raises in your mind the idea of making that same commitment of going into public service. And to me, elected office is just one area. Being involved in communities, there are so many opportunities for you now to be involved in public service, to be involved in social justice now that existed before. And so that's why I believe that it is important. Interns make an extremely important role. They play an extremely important role in our offices. The work that you do is important. And to me, what separates interns, and people are at different stages of their life, so I frankly don't pass judgment on you. But, doing the work, being inquisitive, one thing that doesn't work is being shy. And so, being aggressive in terms of wanting to learn what's happening, wanting to build relationships with staff, wanting to talk to the member of Congress. And so I know that not all members do that, but I also think that you should ask, you should say, I would like to spend a few minutes with the Congresswoman or the Congressman. I think you should say that, whether they make the time. And I frankly get upset if I don't have the time, because sometimes time goes by so quick and interns come and go, and there have been a couple of cohorts that I might have missed, and I don't like that because I think it's very important, and I always try to do it at the beginning. It's because I don't want you to come into my office and feel like you can't talk to me or there's something secret going on in my office. So I like it when interns approach me and want to talk and have something that they want to have a conversation about. I think that's important.
And again, I hope this doesn't bother you that we talked right before we all went on about where you are right now. Because it sure looks like you're sitting in your congressional office. It's very impressive. Explain where you are.
I'm in my dining room in Los Angeles. This is a little fake office, and I have this set up here because I do TV a lot. And so instead of going to my office, which is not far, I'm located right on La Brea and Wilshire, I do TV interviews from here.
Okay, that's yeah, that's great. Can we, Caleb Groen.
Hi, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Sure.
My question is less policy-oriented, but what would an average person find most surprising about the day-to-day life of a congressperson in your experience?
Well, I think that sometimes people don't think we do much, but I think that people would be shocked at the level of intensity. That I know my day begins at about 5 in the morning. I spend a couple of hours every morning reading the news. I have to read international news, domestic news, local news, watch TV, know what's going on all the programs, because that can shape my day. And then when I go into the office, you know, my day is organized in 30-minute intervals. And I work up until the evening. And then when we have these quote unquote recess times, when we're in our district, we're working, so it's a 7-day-a-week job. And I think that most people think, I'm not sure what they think we do, but I do know that they think we vacation when we have recess times. And I don't know too many of my colleagues that have much vacation time.
Joy Craig.
Hold on, sorry.
We hear you, you're good.
Can you hear me? I'm so sorry.
No
I
problem.
didn't realize I muted. Sorry. Hi, Congresswoman Bass, and thank you so much. My name is Joy, third-year political science student at the University of California, Riverside. My question is, if Joe Biden wins the November election and assumes office in January, how would he and how would you and the Democrats in Congress work to resurrect bipartisanship and, and heal our nation right now?
Well, you know, one thing, and by the way, this is part of an answer to the last person as well. One thing that I think people would be shocked about is to the extent that we do work in a bipartisan basis. The problem is, though, is that that's not newsworthy. So, you know, for example, I just passed several bills related to criminal justice reform that were completely bipartisan. But again, that will get no news coverage at all. And so I think that a Biden-Harris administration will set a completely new tone. I also think, and this is hopeful thinking, but I'm almost positive this is going to happen. The minute Trump moves off the scene, the Republican Party is going to change. Now, you have all of these Republicans that are against Trump, Lincoln Project, for example. I think those folks are going to try to resurrect the Republican Party that used to exist. I think their party has been taken over by an extremist element, and I'm hoping that after Trump is off the stage, that it will be a little more normalized. And I think that we'll be able to get more done. I also think that if the election were held today, we would win the Senate as well. And so I think that you will see us being able to do a lot of legislation. In my opinion, the number one issue for President Biden and Vice President Harris is COVID, COVID, COVID. We cannot get our economy back on track or do most other things until we address the pandemic.
Thank you.
We are just about out of time. As you told us, you had 45 minutes, which I appreciate. And as a former news reporter, my instinct is just keep you on till your staff pulls a cane out and drags you away. But I will be respectful about that. So I'll only ask, let me just ask one final question. And you've addressed this already, but I hope you can be even more specific to our students, to the ones who care about the same causes that you do, or even other causes. I mean, you mentioned they can work for nonprofits, but those jobs aren't, they're tough to get. You can get them. It's tough to live, particularly in California, on the wages. Well, good. I'm glad you're shaking your head. I'm just hoping you can give advice. People who care about this stuff, what should they do?
Absolutely. No, see, and this was one of the things I was so committed to doing when I started Community Coalition. And by the way, Community Coalition's 30 years old right now, which is scary for me to think about.
Makes you feel a little old, huh?
It does, it does. But when we built the organization, we built it so that people would not have to live with poverty wages. So people are paid decent salaries in the social justice organizations now. The Center for Nonprofit Management, I believe they have an employment, I think it's called Opportunity Knox, actually. In Los Angeles, you could reach out to Community Coalition, you can reach out to Scope. There's just a number of social justice nonprofits that pay a livable wage, because just think about it. And I felt this way 30 years ago. It was a contradiction to fight for living wage and not pay a living wage, to fight for benefits and not provide them, not provide healthcare, not provide retirement programs. And so what I have found is that since then, the other social justice nonprofits that have started are in line with that. You could work in the labor movement. There's a lot of places to work. I think what people typically do is go and work for an elected official, which is fine. I just want your students to know that there are many, many opportunities. You pick your issue, and trust me, there are organizations that address those issues. And I think if you are not sure where to begin, Community Coalition, I think, and that's my old organization. Now, I left the organization 15 years ago. But they are involved in a lot of different groups and could tell you about the groups. But you want to work in the environmental movement, you want to work in the women's movement, you name it. And there are organizations out there for you.
All right, Representative Bass, again, it goes against every instinct I have not to say we will cut this off, but we'll cut this off. Thank you so much for doing this, and we will send you a UCDC mug, which hopefully you will proudly display at your desk and shock an intern when hopefully you will have interns back in your office very soon.
Always. I hope so too. I hope your next experience is actually in DC. So thank you. And like I said, I hope all of you get involved. And just one last pitch, since we're living in this Zoom environment, have a Zoom call with all of the people you know, no matter where they are in the country, because to vote this time, you have to know how to vote. There is a website that is called iwillvote.com. If you plug into that website, you can put in your information wherever you are in the country and know how to vote in your particular district. We have 20 days to go, and I don't say this is the most important election in my lifetime because I'm tired of saying that every 4 years. This election is a matter of life and death. It really is, because I don't want to sit here 3 months from now and say that 500,000 Americans have died. So that's what's at stake. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, and I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Invite me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.